Let's get started. Welcome to OoruLabs, the podcast where we talk about the future of urban sustainability. We will check out hot topics, trending news in the areas of urban transport, waste, energy, water, and the new digital economy and its implications for urban living. We've been doing quite a few episodes now. In this episode, we talked to Dirk De Jager, the former Deputy Mayor for Amsterdam District. He has decades of experience in building bicycling infrastructure in many countries, including Iran and Turkey. He is now an associate with Stipo, working to build good, inclusive, and sustainable living environments. Welcome to the podcast, Dirk. Very nice to have you on, and thanks for accepting this.
Yes, hello. Hi, Satya. Nice to be with you here. It's nice to be in Bangalore again.
Yes.
Last time in December here, after a period I haven't been here. And it's a nice city. I come from Mysore, where the temperature was a bit higher, and it's nice to be here in the nice temperature and nice surrounding of Bangalore.
Yeah, that's one thing that we have going for this city. Everybody talks about its nice weather, and hopefully that's one thing we don't want to spoil. But, we are human beings here, and we are beginning to spoil that as well. Recently, with all the pollution and the dust and traffic, all of these things, we are beginning to, lay waste to the only natural nice thing that we have for ourselves. So in the news this week, we covered in the CFAM newsletter. So the Council for Active Mobility brings out a newsletter. We had the newsletter number 18, and the news in that was the TomTom index. TomTom is from the Netherlands, and they have an index that they published. It's called the congestion index. Before we jump into it, I'd like to have everyone subscribe to this channel. Just hit subscribe, and also subscribe to the CFAM newsletter. It comes out every week at cfam.substack.com. So the TomTom index rated Bengaluru as the second most congested city in the world after London. Apparently, they said it takes about 29 minutes and 10 seconds by car to cross 10 kilometers. Of course, the average speed being about 18 kilometers per hour, they said. And guess who we beat? London, apparently 36 minutes and 20 seconds. Now, by itself, and there was a news article out, and my response to that was, I think we are measuring the wrong thing. I basically don't think it is useful to measure just a car congestion alone, because we seem to then gravitate towards trying to fix congestion by car as a problem. And what do you think, Dirk? I mean, is that what should be our focus on as a city, as a country, as the world? Where are we going with this? Should this index be even something that we should worry about?
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, as far as some issues are concerned, for example, the climate, the CO2 emissions, we're really running to the edge, I would say, as we have the expression, it's 2 minutes before 12. I think we are a couple of seconds away from the hour 12. And of course, it's not only my opinion. We know that international studies and the International Panel of Climate, the researchers worldwide, they recognize this, and they had some new reports on it, that we are very close to this, and we're running like animals, buffaloes or whatever. We are running to the edge, and within a couple of seconds we will fall down altogether. So I'm not a pessimistic person. I'm optimistic but realistic at the same time. So I think there is still possibilities to save this world, but it's important that we all act on it as well. And this is well needed at a level from the governmental side, internationally, of course, but also national, state level, and municipality level, all levels. I think from the private sector is important as well on this. But the individuals, each and every individual has a responsibility as well on this. Besides the CO2 emissions and the climate, we have the air quality, which in the city of Bangalore, it's a very nice city, but the quality of the air is not good. And we all know that it's caused mainly due to the traffic, the cars and the two-wheelers, rickshaws and trucks and everything, creating this. And we know that the average age for people living in the city, and this is Bangalore, but it's the same for Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, and among other cities. It's at least it's about 6 to 7 years. Your life can be less because specifically because people who have difficulties with their lungs and sensitive for it. So this is crazy, of course, since we try to improve the health, and also in India we try to improve the health of people, but continuing with this, in fact, the society is creating an environment which is not healthy. And beside this, of the quality of life itself, from an economic point of view, it's also not so clever, because this costs a lot of money for health costs, hospital costs, and we don't really need the car, and we don't need, I think, so much two-wheelers in the city center. And the way in the cities in India transport is organized is to be honest not so well. But let's say this should be improved, because we have some experience in the Netherlands on this. I can go more in depth on that if you want so, but
No, I think, yeah, I'd like to hear more on that, because you have been an administrator yourself in the city in Europe. What is the prevalent thinking in Europe? How is Europe moving away? Do they have the same problem? Because we seem to think that without the motor vehicles, somehow our prosperity will be diminished. You know, we seem to have this thing. Oh no, how can we? 7% of the GDP is from the automotive industry. How can you do something to that? But like you said, the costs that we are bearing far outweighs the benefits we are getting from that GDP growth. What is the prevalent thinking in Europe? How are people thinking there? What is the urgency you see in your part of the world?
Yeah. Well, I start with my own country, the Netherlands. We see over the last, I would say, 20 years, more and more awareness on the fact that within the cities, it's not the car or not the two-wheeler who is the primary way of transportation, but it should be much more public transport, cycling, walking. So these three, which are family with each other, because they know each other. This percentage, the model shift on this, the percentage it shifted a lot over the last period. In my own city, Amsterdam, it's for the city as a whole. It's cycling now is 36%, nice. And about 35% is public transport, and the rest is car. And then we have a certain percentage walking. And if you look to the city center, even the city center, it's above 50% cycling. So, and this percentage is growing and growing. But at the same time, the accessibility within the city improved. So using the bicycle in combination with public transport and walking, instead of using the car, it improved the accessibility. And that's something what I see in other Dutch cities as well. Of course, Amsterdam is one of the cities who is quite progressive in this. But I see in some other European cities this changing over the last 10 years as well, specifically after the COVID period. Well, specifically Paris. Paris, they really took the decision to make a shift from car-oriented city to more cycle and walking city. And so they shifted, the cycling improved a lot, and the model shift changed also, though not so dramatically as in the Netherlands, but it's growing. And even in London, this is taking place, in Rome, in Milan, in Barcelona, in Malmö, in Oslo, in Stockholm, in Brussels. So you see this process over the last 5-10 years is going on. So that's in fact the tendency and the process going on in Europe at the moment.
But is that led primarily by administrative decision maker, the political class leading it, or is the people leading it? Who's leading it there?
Yeah. Well, it's a combination. Some people really demanding for better air quality and demanding for better accessibility, and putting pressure on the government side that they need it. But at the same time, also from a political point of view, from a government point of view, the understanding and the fact that this process is needed, also this increased. So these two things are coming together, and that's also, I believe, in that both are needed for this process to go on.
But you especially coming to the Netherlands itself, you guys have been a beacon of cycling culture for a lot of people across the world. How did that begin? Because we've read a lot of stories around the what do you call that? The Kindermood movement, where they stopped the children from being murdered on the street. How did all these things come around? And then we've heard about this oil embargo thing that happened. Tell us a little bit about that. That was interesting for people. That might be interesting for people to hear.
This all happened in the beginning of the 70s of the last century, the past century, and what happened was that by that time, the same as happens in India at the moment, the economy was growing rapidly, and also the same as in India, everyone wanted to have a car. People, their income were increasing. It was affordable for a very big group of people. Also, people with relatively more middle and lower income, they got the opportunity to buy a car. And this was also a symbol of prosperity. So it was not only about that from a rational point of view, you needed a car, but if having the car, it means that you get your good feeling. I'm growing, and which is very understandable, of course. But at the same time, there were not enough measurements taken by the government to protect cyclists, pedestrians, children. So in a relatively short period, especially in the 60s and the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s, enormous of people were killed in the traffic, and other casualties, and then at the moment it was not accepted anymore by, especially in the cities, in Amsterdam specifically, but also in other cities, protests came up. And this was in a period where there were a lot of protests going on against we just had the experience of fighting against the war against Vietnam, and people were much more demanding things, and they were used for protest. So this you can put it in this time period, in this period. And then at the same time, people were blocking the roads and protesting, and they took their children with them. And you can imagine children have a very strong impact
Emotional,
in the media, etc. Then at the same time, in this period, in 1973, the oil crisis came up, and the Netherlands was very depending on oil. They are no oil-producing country. And then the government decided, okay, probably the times before will never come back. We have to accept that we have to live with less energy on oil. So what we do, we just once a month on the Sunday there is no traffic. You cannot drive with your car because we have to save oil. And for the Sundays, it's not really necessary for the economy. So by that time, suddenly the roads were completely empty, all in the cities, but also the highways, nothing. There were no cars at all. And then people discovered suddenly again that the streets and the roads were not dominated anymore by cars, but you could go there. People started to cycling and roller skating, and children were playing on the street again, and people got gathering on the street, social gatherings, and then people discovered, wow, we this is much better, and the air quality by that day was much better for everyone. Well, those two things together, and having, of course, already an history on cycling in our society, gave a kind of chemistry mix to put also pressure on the government. And then the government decided to start a cycling policy. And they started some pilot projects in some cities, in Tilburg, smaller cities, Tilburg, The Hague, and some other smaller cities. And they started with pilot projects to not only make a cycle lane, but more building already cycle networks to connect from, for example, the city center to the railway station, or this kind of connections. And people were very enthusiastic about this, and it worked out positively. And then step by step, this policy came up to build cycle lanes everywhere in the city, because this created more. So people started cycling again more and more, and people became very enthusiastic about cycling. And actually, nobody is against cycling. Who should be against cycling? Cycling is beautiful.
Yeah.
But to be honest, also we had our protests from other sides, for shopkeepers, for example, who didn't want that in front of their street, in their shops, a cycle lane came, because then parking places for cars had to be removed. So we had some difficulties as well to go on. Also me as a deputy mayor, I had some difficulties with shopkeepers and some other persons who were more in favor of the cars. But by proving, by research, proving to the shopkeepers that actually only 20% of their turnover was from customers coming by car, and far more, 30-40% was by cyclists who came by and stopped, or pedestrians, or people who came by public transport. We had the objective proof that it was even better for the shopkeepers to have a cycle path instead of having all those parking places. So step by step, this moved in this direction. But this took us also 40 years or something to come there. And now everyone is so happy about cycling, and we continue with the whole network of cycling, and the percentage is still increasing.
I think that's very interesting. One is the loss aversion is always there. People fear what they lose that they already have access to. Oh, I already have people coming in a car, so I might lose them. There is more value to that loss than what they would gain collectively from having cycle lanes. But what's interesting in this thing that you said is Amsterdam wasn't always a cycling nation. So you're saying, and in the 70s, the same kind of aspirations that we have now was there. There were a lot of cars, the same traffic jams existed there, and people thought like how we think today is that, oh, nobody's going to, kind of do anything about it. So there was, but the fact that there were accidents and people didn't want their children dead or anybody. Look, if you look at it, Karnataka has a 13% share in pedestrian deaths. There needs to be more outrage that we are not generating possibly. I don't know why. Maybe we are taking this for granted that people will die on the roads and it is more important to own the car. This cannot be allowed. That's, I think, the first takeaway for me is that we are at the same inflection point that you were 40 years ago. There is congestion, there is pollution, and it's only getting worse. People are dying on the streets. We're just somehow managing to wing it. And the crisis is also there. I mean, of course, you had the oil crisis, but we did have an opportunity of COVID where the air suddenly got cleaner. 5 times more people were cycling. But we seem to be limbering back to square one, where we're saying, I don't think cycling is an option, but, we can't live without this. I think at some point, you're saying, while there was a bit of opposition, it's useful for the leadership to start showing the way, saying we have to start looking at not just catering to the motor vehicle. And that's a huge fuel import bill as well. We're subsidizing car transport every day in terms of parking charges,
Yes.
right? The taxes that Shreya was saying in the last podcast, that it costs 20,000 rupees to 30,000 rupees for one parking of one car every month. And the whole 15-year road tax that we pay is just 3 months worth of whatever it is. So I don't think we are paying the true cost, and we are not evaluating this right. So I think where do you see this going in countries like India? You worked in Iran, you worked in Turkey, you have seen India now. You've been in Bangalore, and we have spoken a bit. Where do you see this going? Do you think you see anything, any movement? Do you see anything that interests you that you think will change the direction?
Yes, actually, I'm positive about this because I see a couple of things. First of all, I see the awareness of the fact that the change need to be made at different levels. I see people like you and the cycling community is getting more and more aware of the fact that they have to put pressure, and they organize themselves better than, for example, 6 years ago when I was here. Also, I think it needed to organize yourself better. And as we know sometimes, but in every country it's different, of course. In the Netherlands, it's maybe easier to be in action on the street than here in India. It's difficult for me to judge on, but sometimes it's needed to have some movement who really is expressing themselves very loudly. So that's something which really can improve. On the second hand, I see at the level of decision makers, as well as politicians, but also in the people working in the governmental institutions, I see a lot of awareness. For example, the commissioner of Karnataka of DULT, the director of urban land transport, Ms. Manchula, I heard her speaking. She had a speech at the meeting I was last week. She is really very motivated and determined to go in this direction. and to make sure that also from the government side there is facilities and policy to improve cycling and pedestrians. So those two things need to come more together, because you jointly you can make the difference. And I see, as far as content is concerned, I see a lot of possibilities in the city of Bangalore, for example. I think and I mean with the content, I mean to make infrastructure or to create more safe and comfortable cycling. I see a lot of possibilities. You have so many what I would call secondary streets which are not the main roads, which have often quite shadow because of the trees. It's a calming traffic. The average speed is often not is below 30, which we know from research that if it's below 30, it's much safer for cyclists. And then you don't need to make cycle infrastructures in those streets. What you have to do is to make sure that the pavement is good. That now I see too many holes in it. It's very dangerous for cyclists. The potholes are often in the wrong direction if you come with your cycle and with your
the gratings, the grating.
Yeah,
the grating.
You go with your wheel in it. It should be just 1/4 turned, so that you know that it's safe. And sometimes maybe there are some narrow areas. There you can make an intervention with a slide cycling bypass, for example. And what you could do at big conjunctions or crossings where there is traffic lights, make a specific traffic lights for cyclists and give the cyclist 10-15 seconds green light ahead, so that you can have a safe pass, that you are not squeezed by cars or motorcycles or whatever. Give you priority in ahead, for example. Well, these are not big investments, and this can be done easily to improve cycling and already in a safe way. And then at really the main streets, which are corridors, in fact, there you should make good, safe, separated bicycle lanes. So the secondary streets can make a connection with the main streets. And if you connect this again with your metro system and make sure that you have very good parking facilities for cyclists at the metro system, and make it also financially interesting, that if you use the metro, you get free cycling in a bike sharing system, for example, or even what done in Tehran, where this is existing. Even if you use the bicycle more, you get even discount on your metro ticket. So some kind of measurements could be taken also by the government, steps to stimulate cycling, and I'm sure that if you do this and you start this over a period of 10 years, I'm sure that the number of cyclists will increase a lot. And I think, and the other side, what is needed, that you have to, in some areas of the city, you have to start with paid parking as well. And I know it's not popular, I know, and I had some fights as a deputy mayor in Amsterdam as well. People are not enthusiastic about it, but it really works to make more space for cyclists, but also pedestrians, because your public space is for everyone. Public space is a social issue, and it's now dominated too much by cars and two-wheelers. And actually, the public space should belong to everyone, also for pedestrians. People with lower income should have the right to have also good qualitative public space, and the right to have a safe sidewalk to walk. And so that's the way of thinking which should be changed, I think. The concept should be changed that public space is very important for the society as a whole in the functioning.
I think that's where we are I think the conceptualization of a public space is almost like it just exists to serve all the private spaces. It doesn't really matter that it has value attached to it. There seems to be no value attached to it within the eyes of the administration. Somehow we don't believe public space. You said is very interesting. It's a great equalizer, right? It's not about whether you're rich or poor. You have to share that space, and how equitable you make it, how beautiful you make it, is how you experience the city. And I think these spaces between private parties, which is called the public shared space, we need to start paying more attention to it. And I think if you attribute clean, beautiful, accessible for all kind of public spaces, which is basically a large percentage of our public spaces roads right now. Even the parks and other public spaces are being sold off or being built upon. And what the government also doesn't realize is that now you build upon those spaces and you lose them, you're not going to get them back. It's going to be more expensive as the per capita income rises. Every square inch is going to get more expensive for you to get back later. You need to preserve your public spaces right now for later because you're not going to get them back. What's the other interesting point you did say was the nature of slow streets as a concept. So this was something that I found in the DULT's draft active mobility bill, which unfortunately didn't get passed in this session as well. So I'll use this occasion to make an open call to support that bill and make sure that we get a proper protection for pedestrians and cyclists in the city. But in terms of just the slow streets that was mentioned, and that was very interesting. We took it up this year as a campaign, and it is going slow, but we are getting there. I think slow streets is to slow the traffic down, like you said. If traffic is slower, it is actually not dangerous. It can be irritating in heavy traffic. It is little, there is a lot of people around you, not enough elbow space when people are honking at you. It's extremely irritating to ride in very congested traffic, but it is actually safer to ride in congested traffic. Even if you do fall down and get hurt, yes, you do get hurt. I'm not saying you won't, but there is less likelihood of you dying rather than you going in very empty roads where traffic is going in very high speed. You are just as likely to get more grievously injured. People don't correlate these two in their minds very correctly. The congestion and the irritation, they equate to unsafeness. It's actually the other way around. Speed, fast corridors where you feel you have a lot of space is actually unsafe. And like you said, just some stats for the users, for the listeners of this podcast is around in BBMP 736 square kilometers of area, we have about 14,000 kilometers of roads. Right, out of which 2,000 kilometers, around 16%, let's say 20% of Bangalore have 15 meters or wider roads which carry fast moving traffic. So those 2,000 kilometers would, in all chances, you're not living on those 2,000 kilometers of road. You're living on some of those side streets. And if you say I can only cycle when I have cycle lanes everywhere in Bangalore, that's not going to work. You should be able to use the street in front of your house. It is as much your right as it is anybody else's. So what we need to ask for is to calm the traffic down, whatever it takes. It might take enforcement, it might take design, it might take whatever. We have to look at promoting slow streets as a concept and slowing the traffic down and join these cycle lanes on the main roads. 2,000 kilometers of cycle tracks, we need to be building 200 kilometers every year if we have any chance of covering in 10 years, all of those roads by. So that's the speed at which I think we should be building, but I think we are building hardly 2.5 kilometers every year. You and I took a ride last week, and the pictures I put up, a lot of people saw that and thought I was taking you guys down the wrong streets. No, it wasn't. It was not. The sensitivity to cyclists is not there in these countries. I think we should do something to build that, and maybe like Intermode, we have to get on the streets and say, no, we can't be treated like this.
Yes. And coming back on the public space, I know here that a lot of the land is owned privately, which is more difficult for the government to have steer on this, to do something. But the roads and squares, and this is public space. So there you are in the position from a broader societal perspective, from the government perspective, to take measurements, because you're in the position to do things there. I think that's important.
Yeah. I do think they can acquire more spaces now when the cost is lower. Instead of selling off public lands, like the public sector undertakings are selling off the lands, the government should be able to buy more public space now when the costs are lower and keep them for making these things that you said. If you want to, you don't have to necessarily put a cycle track on the road. If you have enough public spaces, you can make them go through that. Like you have Common Park, you can have cycle tracks go through that instead of the traffic going through. I think the government needs to acquire more public spaces properties and keep them open and green instead of selling off everybody. Of course, you can build up some amount of land to pay for something else, but you should have a bigger percentage. And it is possible to incentivize. I don't know if the TOD rules have this. Is it possible to incentivize? I don't know if there are practices that you have seen that if a private party creates more public space in their private space, maybe you can provide more incentives of adding more floors to your building because you created something of public good. I think we need to start innovating on these incentive models for people. Don't you think?
Sure. But then we are coming in the field of urban planning, which is related. And I see specifically here in Bangalore, I have, let's say, two observations. First is that there is still a lot of important functions are centralized in the city, as far as we talk about government buildings or banks, maybe universities, etc. There's a lot of things are centralized in the city, which means everything needs to come to the center. So for the long term, it would be very good to set up a decentralizing policy of this kind of functions. Specifically, if it's our functions which are government related, you could think about, well, we start to move some of those functions to the outside of the city, given the fact that Bangalore is growing very fast still. You have the opportunity to do this because there is activity going on. Which means, of course, that the building who remains, it's not really necessary to demolish the building. Maybe sometimes, I don't know, this could be, but from an energy perspective and a climate perspective, you should be careful with this. But you could think of having other functions in this building which are more related to the local needs, for example, which have less attractiveness from the center, but it's more related to the people living in the center themselves. And then you have less traffic. You have it more decentralized. The second observation is that I see a lot of green land surrounded by how you call it?
Compound wall,
walls,
fence,
etc. But if you look from above, they have big pieces of land which are not used, in fact. And they are green most of the time. Of course, they're privately owned. But exactly maybe what you said is that what the government could do is start negotiating with the owner to see, okay, maybe we can buy it from you. And then you can use it make a nice park in the city and make a good cycle and walk corridors in it. Maybe, as you said, a combination can take place. That maybe some movement in terms of, not movement, but new functions can come there. Some buildings can be made, but partly it stays green, and to move on that. So if you get maybe 30% of all those, or 40% of all those areas being park, and being people can use it, it helps you a lot in your network as well. Of
Yeah,
course,
I think so.
that's and it becomes public space. You need
It
public
does.
space, and you can improve the quality of the public space in your city. But this is
I
urban
agree.
planning. Uh,
I know.
uh, but these are big opportunities, I think.
They are. I think urban planning and the transport is tightly linked. There, it's a transport is a derived demand with the TOD policy and everything, and with the new BMLT that the government just approved. It's a long road for BMLT. It took TFL 20 years to get somewhere. We are making the moves a little late, but we need to also speed up a lot of our thing. But here's something that people ask me, and I think a couple of them wanted me to ask you. Uh, what is this Dutch cycling culture people talk about? So I, maybe you can tell us what it is and how can you pass on some of that culture to us? What
Well,
does it mean to be
yeah,
cycling? Is it? It's not. I mean, of course. Do people just naturally cycle? Why is it so hard for people here? We give 100 excuses to get on. There's weather, there is traffic, there's lots of things, but there you just get on it, right? I don't know. What is that?
it's difficult exactly to catch that from an
Mm-hmm.
from a research or an objective perspective. But I think there is some elements historically in
Mm-hmm.
relation is the fact that in our culture in general, um, if you are getting a better position in society, you getting you go to a higher class in terms of money, you don't show off.
Mm.
You try to keep yourself not to try. Now I buy a new car and a show car, or now I buy new clothes, or I buy a big house to show, look how rich I am. Because we had different in the past, same as in India, by the way. We
Mm-hmm.
had
Mm-hmm.
Protestants, we had
Mm-hmm.
Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
and within the Protestants, you had different directions as well. Um, and they all had to deal with each other in the country. Um, and we had this land which was below sea level, and we
Mm.
had to protect our country with dikes to pump out the
Mm.
water and create a polder, it's called.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
we had to work together to make that the water level within the polder was not too high and not too low, so that
Okay.
everyone could use the land for agricultural reasons, but you have also natural reasons. So everyone had to deal with each other to in a
Mm.
joint way to come with it. So it's more
Mm.
in the culture not to show off too much how rich
Mm-hmm.
you are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think using the bicycle is a bit part of that culture. The reason that
Mm.
our king and queens always went by bicycle, they wanted to show, and our prime minister still go by bicycle to his work, and he wants to show, I'm a normal man. I'm
Mm.
representing you. I'm not a rich separated. I'm the same. I represent you as a how we call it, the man in the street.
Right.
I
Right.
don't want to. So this using this bicycle is also connected to this part somewhere.
Excellent. I think this is what I looked at Bogota Change, where Enrique also did this. Is this coming back down as the gap grows between people? Keep thinking these guys are, the rich people. They keep doing things for themselves. The bicycle becomes a powerful tool for them to come back down. I can see. I think maybe we should use that here to bring people back. The show off thing will die down. I hope we don't. I think we should build that culture as well. I think there's just these are good tools to look at equalization of people's feelings,
Yeah,
and I think it
yeah,
is cultural as well.
yeah.
That's a very interesting take. I don't think you can just transplant that, but I think the idea that what's the point of showing off with your car? It's just causing a lot of harm. right?
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
No, it's in the Netherlands, for example, now, if I come to a party, which is not too far from my house, and a person asks me, how are you here? And I said, by car. They look at me, oh, that's a bad thing.
Right.
Huh?
We need to bring that. You need to bring the taboo in people's minds.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are, it's very positive. This cycling is a positive, for everyone, a positive thing. And I can, for example, for people who might be listening and watching, we have two interesting movies on it. One is an older one, which you can find on YouTube easily, which is called How the Dutch Get Their Cycle Lanes.
I think I watched this. I'll put it out in the show notes.
Yeah.
I'll get these links from you and I'll put it in the show notes down there.
How the Dutch Get Their Cycle Lanes. And the second one is a newer one, which is Together We Cycle.
This is on YouTube as well?
Together We Cycle. I think you have to pay for it, but I'm not sure. But you can.
Oh, is this the one I think this is the one I screened a while ago for some special people a long time ago, a couple of years ago. I think I screened this through the Dutch consulate for a few people. Maybe I'll just check that out.
That's
anyway,
a relatively new one, younger one, which is very, very well done, to be honest. You have a short version and a longer version. The short version, I'm not sure. We have to check whether you have to pay for it or not. But maybe if some people say, well, as a group, together as cyclists, we like to watch it. Maybe together you can pay something for it and have a nice evening together with each other. Sit down with some food and some drinks and watch the movie. And then I think it's also a nice movie to show and have a discussion and talk about it with each other, because it's all about the elements you asked me about, the history, about the culture. They explaining in the movie much better than I can do, I think. You see it. It's very interesting to watch and to get a better understanding also in relation to the Indian situation. And we showed the movie in the training. We had a training in Mysore with 45 people from different professionals from municipalities, mainly from Karnataka, but also some from Gujarat and Kerala. And a lot of them, when they have seen the film, they say, "Well, we had the same in the Netherlands as in India," and it gave them also, it strengthened them to continue with the process, and they strengthened them. Okay, it's a long time, but you should start somewhere, and then you end up as long as you go in the right direction. At the end of the day, you get there what you want to.
Excellent. So I think the recent for past 2 years, the Cycle for Change program from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, the Smart Cities Mission, under the mission director, they have been doing quite a bit with ITDP. We've been supporting them this time with the Altmo platform as well. There is a momentum. Some of the smaller cities have picked it up nicely, and I'm also working with some of them to see how can we institutionalize more counting of cycling, more looking at data, looking at using as many tools as you can, and building equitable infrastructure as we go along on the streets. So with this, I don't want the podcast to go on for too long. I'd like to have you on again, and let's talk a little more. I'll look at these two movies that you talked about and see how we can get the screening. I remember screening Together We Can a while ago, I think a couple of years ago. Let me try and see if we can get that done again.
Yeah, I will see where I can find links and send it to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that should be good. I'll put the links out here as well. But thank you very much, Dirk, for your time, and happy to have you in my city, and hopefully we can together see the growth of bicycling infrastructure in the city, and hope the administrators and the political people start recognizing, and last but not the least, the people I work with, the people of the city, they need to start looking at this. They can't just say somebody is going to fix the transport problem. Nobody's going to fix the transport problem. You need to get on the street with your bicycles and start demanding better cycling infrastructure. There is no shortcut. If you don't do the walking and the cycling, the infrastructure isn't automatically coming. Yes, it is chicken and egg. Yes, there are things that we are doing. Yes, people are interested, but start showing up on a bicycle as much as you can. With that, I'd like to thank you, and thanks very much, Dirk, for being on
Yes.
the show.
Just thanks, Sherry. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure talking with you. Interesting issues, and I'm sure that if the people and you with your movement and organization continue, and I'm also positive about what the government wants to do, DOT together, and we have already one important bill passed in December, and the other one, I hope, the active mobility bill. I hope, fingers crossed, that it will pass well. And hopefully we did some training, and maybe it need to continue. Well, all those elements together with work step by step. It's not one thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
everything. You need all elements and legislation and more budget and quality from everyone, and some pushing from the people themselves. All together, I'm sure you're heading in the right direction. I wish you a lot of success with this, and if you know, we are close together, so if there's anything needed or something, I'm very happy to give any support and share some experiences from my country with you.
Absolutely. With those wise words, let's all come back next week and we'll talk a little more about cycling. Thank you all folks for listening in. Do subscribe and share. Thank you.